Have you seen this card? Oh my, I'm very excited for the future.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hello card fighters, welcome to a new discussion video where we're going to talk about the latest release we got for basically a sneak peek what we're going to get for the upcoming for a few sets away for Gear Chronicle. And we got introduced to this guy. And basically his name, Interdimensional Dragon Knight Lost the Legend. And I'm already loving that name though. And Bushiroad announced at the beginning, I believe at the beginning of the standard, that every clan was going to get supported. And that Gear Chronicle wasn't going to get a focus around Chronojet. So I was very curious of what the route they were going to take and what the main guy is going to be. And I'm expecting that this card is going to be the VR because it's on the box. And basically every card that's been on the box of every set has been the VR. So that my biggest hunch is that it's going to be the VR. But I was very curious of what Gear Chronicle was going to do in standard. And I had some kind of few expectations, like I was hoping that they were going to focus on a more control way that Gear Chronicle was when they introduced it in G. Because, spoiler alert, time leaping and zodiac time leaps wasn't the first thing that Gear Chronicle did. Their first mechanic was rewind, and that's basically taking your opponent's units and putting it back on the bottom of the deck, and either nothing happens or your opponent could choose to search a card from their deck with a grade -1 and call it to the rearguard circle. And I was hoping that if they're going to release more cards, that they have this kind of mechanic to them. And because they announced how Protect and Force and Exile were going to work, I was thinking, well, Protect is the control kind of clan, so maybe Gear Chronicle is going to get Protect. But we now know it's going to get Force. But that's already fine, because in Premium that is very logical, because for Premium you can then make Time Leap get a comeback, because Time Leap with Force is very strong, because you can get more use out of those Force markers. But for Standard I'm very curious of what they're going to take this Force, where they're going to take this Force archetype for Gear Chronicle. And at first, when they released, before this card was announced, I was very down. I wasn't really excited because they got Force, because most clans that have Force are very dumbed down clans that doesn't do very much. But now that we have got this skill, I'm very excited of what we're going to get. Because, one, the art style. It's back to steampunk, because Zodiac Time Leaps was everything but steampunk. So I'm very glad for that. We're back to steampunk, because this art is perfect in my mind. It's basically what steampunk and steampunk dragons should have been, and especially steampunk dragon knights. It's amazing. And to get to its skill, he has two skills. One is when it's ridden upon, so it's similar to I believe the Oracle Think Tank has something like that. And is when it's ridden upon, you can counterblast to draw a card. Alright. I'm not gonna beat the bush up, that sounds bad. It's just bad. Counterblast 2 to draw a card, it's just bad. The only way that they can redeem it is making that either you could spam this effect, that if it was counterblast 1 you could maybe draw a lot of cards in one turn, or that they're going to have an amazing countercharge engine. Because they cannot redeem this card effect if they don't get a countercharge and get any countercharge. And that's very much possible, because we have seen a couple of clans that don't get countercharge at all. And most of them have been Force clans, because Dimension Police, no countercharge. And Royal Paladin, no countercharge. So, who knows? But the other effect is where things get interesting. His other effect is, and this is what the community has been rioting about. His other effect is, you can discard cards from your hand, and if you discard to 3 or more, you can search up a grade 4 from your deck, write it as stand, and at the end of the turn retire that unit and write a grade 3 from your soul as rest. So everybody that's playing Vanguard before standard was a thing, that's basically strides from your main deck. So your Gear Chronicle is going to get an early version of strides before we're going to reboot the G series, if they're going to introduce strides then. So that's very interesting. And I was when I saw that, I was like, all right. So we're going to get Great Force in deck. We're going to get strides. We're going to get actually the original time leap thing. And that is something that I really was hoping for, the other thing than just rewind. So when I saw this, I was ecstatic beyond what you can imagine. Because this is basically one of the two things I was hoping for that Gear Chronicle was going to get. Because the stride mechanic was originally the thing that came from Gear Chronicle. If you read the lore and read into how things originated. It was Gear Chronicle's thing. And the fact that they don't get an extra deck is perfect, because as you have seen maybe my other discussion video, links on top, where I discussed my issues with the stride within GR, where they went from starting to finish. Getting into the deck is basically what I came up with an idea to maybe balance out stride. And now they're giving it right out of the get-go. Perfect. Because they cannot, unless they make those cards incredibly busted, but I don't think they're going to do that. Then it's just granted and basically future-proof for that. Because there are a lot of people are saying it's busted, it's very too strong, but let's tackle every one of those points and see if that's really the case. Because this card is going to be a kicker, and I like the way that they designed it. Alright, first off, a lot of people say that you can stack multiple force markers, because you write the grade 3, one force marker, then at the end of the turn it writes itself from rest, and you get another force marker. That's true, but keep that in mind, the second force marker is at the end of the turn, so you don't have immediately access to that force marker. At the same time, you're discarding probably grade 3, so you're losing a force marker because you're discarding it. So, is that really an extra force marker? Yes and no. The other thing is that people think that the grade 4s are going to have force markers. So you can write, then stride and have double force markers. Is that very strong? Depends on the situation. I don't think they're going to have force markers on the grade 4, because they showed a demo and basically it was an empty card, just a card with a 4 on it, and it didn't take a force marker when it did that. It doesn't mean that they're not going to get it, because it was just a template card, but if they're going to, even if they have the force marker, it's just basically 2 force markers plus 20 on the field. Because you're discarding your grade 3s, it's not like you're going to spam every turn getting 2 3s, force markers, because you're discarding your grade 3s continuously. So you're minusing your options to use your force, to gain extra force markers. So in that, I think the initial turn is going to be very strong, but after that I think it balances out itself, if they even have it. But it can possibly that they don't get it. I'm also fine with that. Because we have now, let's say the double markers isn't really uncommon now, because we have things like Dark Regulars, where they can write up from the soul and get 2 extra protect markers. I think 2 extra protect markers, then double force markers way stronger though, because you can guard 2 attacks, and force markers is just 1 stronger attacks, or maybe 2 stacks a little bit stronger. So there's a difference in that. Because that's one thing. And the other thing is, the strides are in deck, meaning they're less consistent, because there's a chance, because we don't know if they count towards your card deck limit. It can be. It can also be that they're excluded from deck limit and that they have an own limit, just like the GSO maybe, that they say you can run only 4 and it don't count towards your main deck. I don't know, but let's assume that's not the case. They're just normal cards from your deck. That means that you're not going to run that much of them, because otherwise your deck is getting too inconsistent. There's a big chance, there's a reasonable chance that the moment that you write your grade 3, that you've drawn all your grade 4s. What you gonna do then? If you look at this card, it's basically a dead card at the point, because the skill for striding isn't a skill in the game, it's a skill on this card. Keep that in mind, it's a skill on the card that allows us to stride. So meaning that maybe other grade 3s don't have that option. You need to be sitting on this thing. So if you don't, maybe the time that you can go into this thing, you have drawn all your grade 4s. Then you basically can't do anything. If those grade 4s have probably the skill, continuous skill, that you cannot write them or call them from your hand, maybe something like that. I've seen some people maybe argue, well, maybe they have the skill, put them on the bottom of your deck, draw a card and do something or thing. I'm like, I don't think they're going to get that. I don't hope they're going to get that, because going to make them more consistent. I think this should be something that has to be in some inconsistency to it. So keep that in mind. There's a possibility that you can even use the stride mechanic because you already drawn the card for some reason, or they have all been sent to the damage zone because they are in your main deck. Keep that in mind. The consistency is nowhere near what the G zone and what strides were in the G era. These are two completely different things. These are more something like if you played very old school with where Nouveau Express was a grade 4 in Kagero, where you run that thing in your deck. It's maybe something like that. And I believe, and didn't play at the time, I believe I heard people that played at the time that you didn't actually play the card because it was way inconsistent, because you had extra grades in your deck and the time that you could draw in was not really that good. They had a searcher, maybe that was made the deck more viable. I can't really express my opinion about it because I've never experienced it, but I believe it wasn't really that good because you were clouding your deck with more grades. So keep that in mind. And that's also the last negative part of the card, is that you have grade 4s in your deck. So the consistency is way down. Your deck consistency is also way down. And the double, but you have the double potential markers, maybe triple depending on the situation, but we don't know that yet. I'm going to rate this card eventually, and when the set is completely revealed in Japan, I'm going to make a set review like every other thing. So you guys are probably wondering what I would rate the card. If this what it is, this what it is, what we're going to get, and the strides are actually pretty meh, this card would be definitely a 1 out of 5 stars. Because it does nothing on its own. It's completely dependent on what the grade 4s are going to do. And the way how consistent the grade 4s are in your deck makes also this card worse. Because if this card is the only one that has the stride mechanic, then it's the point, like, you need to get this card, otherwise you cannot use those grade 4s. And the way are you going to draw this one before your grade 4s? Are there way to enable that? Is there a way to fix that? You don't know. We don't know. And we don't know how good the grade 4s are. So I can actually not rate the card because I don't know the entire thing. Like I said in other videos, some cards looked very odd and very weird. And it was like, how is this deck going to function? Like Mega Conley, the cards weren't that great on their own. I would rate them much lower. But because we got the last pieces with the VR and the triple Rs, then suddenly every card jumped in power because there was the final cog to the machine and everything worked perfect. The same thing can happen to this card, because if the grade 4s are amazing and they can recycle themselves, and you can fetch this thing, for example, then suddenly this thing can jump way up to a 4 or 5 star card, maybe even 6 star, but I don't hope so and I don't think so though. But for as now as this card is single on its own, 1 out of 5. Because it does nothing. The counterblast 2 run upon, that's laughable. I mean, that's just a joke. There's gotta be something to that, because otherwise that's just for giggles. Or maybe Bushiroad is just pulling a leg. This is basically maybe the rare grade 3, and they just changed the box top art, and then suddenly they reveal the actual VR that has a lot better skill, that also has a stride mechanic. Maybe it's the grade 4 is the VR, who knows? And then suddenly they change the box art, and the skill of the card is totally different. Maybe they're gonna do that. I don't think so though, but hey, who knows? I very enjoy this card. I'm very excited and curious of what they're going to do. Expect me to go cover more and everything in depth when they release more Gear Chronicle cards. Because as a Gear Chronicle main and a Gear Chronicle player, basically, I cannot stay still when they reveal more Gear Chronicle cards. Because at this point, I'm loving everything about it. They increased the rarity of the box set, so I'm very happy with that, because it's the Gear Chronicle set where it's in. And they revealed this card. They basically accomplished 66% of my expectation for standard Gear Chronicle. The aesthetic, check. The stride mechanic, basically, check. The only thing that I was hoping for that's not been checked yet is the fact that they work around control and rewind. If they're gonna do that, then I'm all set for Gear Chronicle and for Extra Booster 4, and I'm gonna enjoy that time when that set is going to be released, I believe in January. So sadly, just a bit short of my birthday, around 25th of December. If there was, I mean, Japan is going to get it before that, so I'm sad. I'm pretty jealous for them. But hey, I can wait for a little bit longer, and in the meantime I can make enough content for you guys. And yeah, let me know what you guys think of this card for Gear Chronicle, about what they announced for how Gear Chronicle maybe is going to work. Are you excited as I am? And what are your expectations for Gear Chronicle? Or maybe for the other clans that have been announced, like Great Nature or Genesis, or maybe even Angel Feathers Gold and Gold Paladin that are going to be in the upcoming booster sets. Let me know what you think. And as always, I'm Mr. Tiny, and I'll see you guys in the next one.